On today's show, Kristaps Porzingis gets traded to the Washington Wizards. Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans coming back to Dallas. Latvian Lasers get swapped. The Mavericks get their point guard secondary created that they wanted. Why did the Mavs do this deal? Did the Dallas Mavericks get absolutely fleeced by the Wizards in this deal? And what does it mean for the Mavericks going forward? We'll talk about that and more on today's Emergency Locked On Now.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
The Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every single day. And then possibly later, your second listen when we have an emergency podcast. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Help us get to 10,000 subscribers. We appreciate it. We do Mavs every single day, 5 days a week, and even every single post-game show. So sometimes we do 7 shows a week, depending on the week. But we are here for you guys. We're here for Mavs fans. Isaac and I have been covering the team since 2016, 17, 15 for you, I think. We're credentialed members of the media. We've been doing all this stuff. Joining me, as always, my co-host, contributor, writer at Mavs.com, the trade titan, the One More Thing King. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
What happened? Oh my gosh. This is, we reference the KP trade a lot on our pod about how when we did that emergency pod, a handful of years ago, and how it's crazy. And I left my son's doctor's appointment and went up. And
where'd you leave your son this time?
My son's at home with my wife.
Okay, good. He's taking care of him.
I'm at my day job, recording this, the church I work at. And I mean, when that news dropped about Kristaps Porzingis, I was just like, whoa, they went for it, right? Because this guy, they bring this guy in, they make the all-in trade for him in New York.
Porzingis.
And for Porzingis. And, to pair a second star next to Luka, right? They swung for it. They, as in the old front office regime. Like, that's a key part to remember of this whole thing. Of the previous front office swung for it. The previous front office signed Kristaps Porzingis to that massive deal coming off the injury. And it just hasn't worked. It just hasn't. I mean, you could, from injury wise to we could talk about team, chemistry wise, we could talk about fit with him and Luka. It wasn't working like it was expected. A new regime came in, and a new regime said, it's time to swap out some parts.
Absolutely. And when I first saw this deal, so the full deal is Kristaps Porzingis goes to the Wizards along with a second round pick, and Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans come back for the Mavericks. We'll talk about all the different, cap ramifications and things like that. But let's start with this. This is a bad trade. If you think about Kristaps Porzingis in the sense that he's supposed to be the all-star second star that the Mavs acquired. Yeah, hold on with your reaction. Hold on before I finish the take, Isaac. Everyone's like responding with you in their cars. This is a bad trade, right? If you're thinking about Kristaps Porzingis as the second star, the all-star the Mavericks acquired to become the second guy next to Luka, this is an awful trade if you look at it. You get Dinwiddie, who was available this offseason. The Mavs could have just signed him. He's been playing terribly for the Wizards. The Wizards apparently don't like him, and the teammates don't like him either, right? From Kevin O'Connor. We've been talking about that rumor for weeks now, it seems like. And so now they get that. Davis Bertans is almost exactly in the same place as Tim Hardaway Jr., where he was shooting incredibly. They signed him to this big deal, and then as soon as they signed him to a deal, he's been playing really bad for the Wizards, and he's been out of the rotation. The Wizards have too many wings, too many guys like that, and so now all of a sudden he's this albatross contract that's just sitting on the books for them, and they just decided to move on from him. And the Mavs also had to send a pick in the direction of the Wizards. So this is a terrible trade if you're looking at it from the sense of Kristaps Porzingis was supposed to be the star. But it signals a lot of things, right? It signals that the Mavericks front office with Nico Harrison at the helm now had to move on. They decided they had to move on from this. They could not move forward. They couldn't make any huge steps forward. I saw so many of you guys tweet or message or comment, the Mavs aren't going to make any moves. They're not going to make any big moves. So why are you guys even talking about this? And I think part of the reason why people were thinking about this is because they were so stuck with a couple of these guys, right? Kristaps Porzingis being the biggest one of them. I think it was Bob Stern from the Ticket that tweeted, it was a really good point, said, this is a process-stopping situation for the Mavericks. The Mavericks couldn't move forward in their process unless they moved on from Kristaps Porzingis. They were just going to sit around and wait till he was available again, right? This is what the Mavericks, they kind of had to do this, and they're admitting to this, that they had to move on from him if they were going to take a big step forward.
If you look at this trade from 2 years ago, and if you're 2 years ago saying this is the deal that's going to happen in 2 years, yes, it's a bad trade. But if you look at this trade from like right now, I don't think it's a bad trade. And I think I'm in the minority of that. I even tweeted that because I feel like there are, one, Mavs Twitter doesn't represent the whole fan base, but just strolling, through there a little bit, it's like, okay, that's seen some panic reaction to it, but I'm not in that camp. I mean, we're talking about a guy who just missed. I mean, this is going to feel like a Porzingis bash fest at this point, but it's just there's just some honesty of this. I mean, he's missed over 20 something games this season. We've went through the whole.
He's not even injured.
Yeah,
right? Like, he doesn't even have a big injury. He's hurt, but he's not injured, right? He doesn't even have this. He's not an ACL sprain. It's not one of those things that's a huge injury to him. It's just these little nagging things. And this was supposed to be, I got the water right here.
Here we go.
Coming in, he was the healthiest offseason he'd ever had. And here we are with Kristaps Porzingis missing all these games still. Yeah,
and it's like, on yesterday's pod, we casually threw out there, some, Porzingis name a few times, a few,
in a Westbrook trade that was
in a Westbrook, but the whole
ridiculous.
It was ridiculous, but the whole mindset of it was, what if Dallas wanted to get off Porzingis's money? Because the whole thing is, I mean, we were just months ago of hearing a lot of people in the national media say Porzingis's contract is one of the worst in the league, right? I mean, I feel like it's what we would hear. And it's like, oh, there's no way they could even trade that. I mean, come on. And it's like being referred to some of these like massive deal, like a Tobias or a John Wall or something like that. And it's like, okay, it's not as bad as like a John Wall but what's the Porzingis cycle? Somebody tweeted out a while back, a KP cycle.
Yep.
And it's man, KP's out. He's hurt again. He's out for a couple weeks, and everybody's wanting to trade him. Then KP comes back, and it's like, okay, all right, let's give it a little bit of time. And then he's like humming on all cylinders. Sweet, awesome. Don't trade him. That's our second piece. Oh, KP's hurt again. Well, why don't we? And it's like this. It's been this cycle for a few years, and Dallas is done with the cycle. Like that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's just what it is. It's like, hey, this is a new regime, and they're probably like, hey, let's be done with it. But we also don't know the full story of this too. Like, are we just going to think that Jason Kidd and this coaching staff just immediately made Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis best buddies, and they're going to be in each other's weddings and they're getting dinner every night together? Like, we don't know what that relationship's like. It feels like it's better this year. We don't know what Porzingis' relationship like with the front office and all of that. It feels better because of this coaching staff and stuff. But at the end of last season, KP was going to be gone. Like, he was going to be gone. Yeah, and he wanted that. And then bam, the front office upheaval happened, and it's like it just seemed like it just bought it time, right? It's like, okay, that's the change, and now let's move. We'll try it out. First healthy offseason, we made the change. KP's back, happy. Let's play more. We don't know. I mean, you've alluded to this in the past on the spot of like, what if there was some type of conversations with Porzingis of, hey, we've changed out the coaching staff. We're going to get you more involved, post-ups, all this with the intention of we'll find you a new home. And it's like nobody's talking about that angle right now. But if you factor in all of that and health and just the fit and all and building around Luka or somebody that might not be playing, 40% of the season all the time, like that's the type of stuff where I'm not jumping for joy saying this is the home run grand slam of a move. But I'm I'm positive coming out of this saying, okay, they ended a process, like you said, and they swapped out the money and said, let's try out some new pieces around Luka.
That's exactly what they did. And we'll come up and talk about why the Mavericks made this specific move and what this move actually does for the Mavericks. And there's still some breaking news as we're recording this at 3:30 p.m. here on Thursday, Dallas time. So we'll talk about all that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores and news this offseason. They have the odds and lines that are better than anybody else. They have updated championship odds. You ready for this? BetOnline has Golden State #1 plus 400. Brooklyn Nets plus 500 now. They make the Ben Simmons, James Harden trade. I'm sure you and I will break that down over the next couple of days for the Mavericks perspective. Phoenix Suns plus 500. Sixers plus 650. Sixers moving up. They're past the Bucks, the Heat. And then the Bucks are plus 700. Big gap right there between the Bucks and the Heat, who are at plus 1200. That is wild to me that there is such a big gap between them. Then it's the Jazz plus 1400. Lakers plus 2200. Lakers odds are always inflated because of Lakers fans voting for them. Chicago Bulls plus 3,300. The Chicago Bulls to win the championship. Wild odds. So if you want to go put down any money on that, go check out Bet Online. They have the best stuff. Don't wait to take advantage of the new amazing offers this season for the 2022 season. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, Isaac, how many times did I say off season in that? Because just thinking about this trade and thinking about it being the off season. But it kind of gets me into this next mode. I was thinking about, why did the Mavericks make this trade? Why this trade? Why now? Why Dinwiddie and Bertans? I've seen a lot of people say already on Twitter and other places, the Mavericks got worse today. And I kind of agree with that, right? If Porzingis plays...
No, I don't.
If Porzingis plays, and he plays the way that we've seen him this year, where he plays the defense he plays, and he, finishes around the rim, and maybe he hits some threes. He hasn't been this year, but maybe he hits some threes. The Mavericks are a team that no one can stop, right? I think it was Joel Mulinax from Grizzlies SB Nation that said the Porzingis was the second scariest thing about the Dallas Mavericks from a Grizzlies perspective. And I countered with, well, Porzingis was the scariest thing for the Dallas Mavericks for the actual team. But that's what it is, right? That Porzingis, when he plays, was really good. He played well this season. He played defense way better than we expected. But it wasn't good enough, right? We kept saying he has this next level of expectation, and he couldn't reach it. He couldn't reach it because he couldn't stay on the court, and he couldn't reach it because of the limitations in his game. And so the Mavericks decided to make the move, like we talked about in the first segment. They decided to move on from him, decided to get out of this. And so now they bring in Dinwiddie and Bertans that sort of answer a couple of questions, but in a smaller way.
I think the Mavericks looked at it and they said, hey, we just beat Atlanta. We just beat Philly. We've played well without Porzingis. We're 13-7 this year without him. You look over the past few seasons, we're 40-27 without him. We can switch. We can do our thing. I mean, we'll talk tonight about some questions probably that they still have as far as who's going to play center for them this season for the rest of the year, committed to Dwight Powell and stuff to get a buyout guy. But I think it mainly came down to, we're paying $30 million to a guy, going to pay him 30 next year, then 30, 36 year after that, because he's definitely going to pick up the player option for a guy that ultimately we might not need to win basketball games. And that, I mean, we have talked about what's going to be the closing lineup. How's the playoffs going to shake out? I mean, we were just, less than a year ago that Porzingis was being put in the corner in a playoff series and just say, hey, be Ryan Anderson, be a Bertans. I mean,
really,
be Bertans.
He was, yeah.
And a lot of people blame Rick Carlisle for that. It was like, oh, Rick just didn't want to use it. No, there was reason why he was just thrown into a corner. Okay. Like there's a lot of his play with that and his mobility on defense and all of that stuff. So if I'm looking at it and I'm saying, if I have to spend $30 million on a guy that, okay, well, let's see about the fit. Let's, make sure they stay healthy. Let's see about the health stuff. You know what? I'd rather swing for a wing. I'd rather swing for a guard. Like I would just rather swing for it in that amount of money for a guy like that and say, let's see what we can get in Dinwiddie. He's having a down year, but let's see what we have. Like for me, it's more about Porzingis for a Dinwiddie swap. I don't give a crap about the second round pick. Some people get really up in arms about the second round pick.
It shows more about value than it does about, than it actually matters in the aggregate.
Yeah. So for me, we could talk about money. A lot of the money is a wash, this year, next year. We could look into that Bertans player option at the very end of that. That's the year that you're adding money to it, basically. But I just think it boils down to that of, we think we can win without Porzingis. So why don't we switch him out for a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie who can get buckets? And I don't even agree with the notion of Kristaps Porzingis raises our ceiling higher than what a Dinwiddie and Bertans do.
The idea of him does, Yes,
but I still think you're running into issues comes playoff time, right? Like, I mean, I feel like you're still getting you're still going to get obliterated in a pick and roll. Like we're still going to have an issue if he goes against a big bodied center in the playoffs that he's going to get kind of bodied down low. Like
that's both things. That's both things you see in the playoffs is a pick and roll with a real speedy guard or a big that can back you down, right? Like those are the two things you see in the playoffs, and the Mavs couldn't defend against either of them with Porzingis. So where was he defending well? Against the teams that don't do those things, right?
Like a year ago, somebody like legit reported, it might have been Jake Fisher, reported that the only way Dallas could get off the contract of Kristaps Porzingis could have been like Al Horford in a pick from OKC. Do you remember those days? I remember those days of saying
Petridge Farms remembers those.
Holy crap, man. Is that the only way that they're out from this? So now we're going from that to let's add Spencer Dinwiddie to the mix of a scoring guard and saying, I get it. He hasn't had a great season, but let me swing with Spencer Dinwiddie right now. We swung for 3 years with KP. I'll swing with Dinwiddie right now.
The other thing about this deal that's really fascinating is if you think about it, you look back at, okay, when Dinwiddie had that year with the Nets, right? He averaged he's just 2 years removed from, 20 points a game, 7 assists, and leading the Brooklyn Nets to the playoffs, I think, before even the KD and Harden and Kyrie and all that stuff. And then Davis Bertans, if you look at him, the year before he actually got paid, if he did this deal then, it would probably been a pretty good move for the Mavericks, right? You would have looked at it and said, oh, dang, I can't believe they got those guys for this. But now just because of the time and the way that value fluctuates for some of these guys, Davis Bertans is just, a couple years away from shooting 42% from three.
It was last year.
Well, last year he shot 40% on 7 a game, but 42% the year before that on almost 9 threes a game, right? This is how it works in the NBA, right? Value goes up and down, but could I see these two guys come in and revitalize some of what they had those last couple of years? Like they've shown in the past, these are not trash players, right? We've seen in the past these guys have value for a team that can use them in the right ways. And so this is not just the Mavericks just completely punting on Kristaps Porzingis and getting nothing back for them, right? I think we also have to consider that. The other thing that we have to consider is the salaries, right? Because I think this is the big part of this deal. The players may not even matter for this part. Let's just take the players and push them somewhere else. And Kristaps Porzingis was making $31 million, $31.6 million this year, $33.8 million next year, and then a player option for $36 million that we pretty much all expected him to pick up because of the injuries and because of all that. So that's going to be 2 more years on top of this one for Porzingis making max money. These two guys coming in, Dinwiddie makes 17 this year, 18 the next year, and then it's a non-guaranteed after that. So you could get off of Dinwiddie's money next year, right? You could get off of him with an expiring deal and you could send him somewhere else. Davis Bertans makes 16 this year, 16 million next year, 16 after that, and then a non-guaranteed. So you're basically getting off a lot of that money from Porzingis early. You're getting off of,
next
2 years from now, about $20 million in 2 years from now. But you also split Porzingis' contract into 2 players. So then that becomes way more, to use a football term, multiple. You become more multiple, right? You could do a couple different things. It's much easier to put Davis Bertans $16 million or Dinwiddie $17 million in a deal than it was Porzingis for $30 million. So for all the things we said in the first segment about how the Mavericks were held back by Kristaps Porzingis' on-court limitations, the off-court limitations for them with his contract and his injuries and all that kind of stuff, for them to make a big deal and to take a huge step forward, that changes with these 2 guys. Now that you have 2 guys instead of 1. So now the Mavs all of a sudden have all these different contracts that they can trade. And Dinwiddie at 18, Bertans at 17, Powell at 11, all these guys.
Tim Hardaway at 18. We'll talk about it here probably in just a second, but they just signed Dorian Finney-Smith to his extension. So he's going to be making $13 million a year for the next 4 years. So now they have the contracts, right? I mean, there was a reason why Tim Hardaway Jr. was being rumored in all of these deals, because he was about the only guy that made in that 18 to 20 range, where Porzingis was too much, Dwight and them were too little. So now they have all these contracts where if they want to go shopping for a bigger name, they can match the money.
Absolutely. So those are the 2 things, right? That when you look at this deal, and I saw a couple people, I think I even saw Anthony Irwin and be like, what the hell are the Mavericks doing? This is what the Mavericks are doing. They decided
I just don't get that. I don't understand.
Well, if you don't understand the Mavs situation, you haven't watched Porzingis, you wouldn't understand, right? It's like, when we say, I don't understand how the hell Anthony Davis has made the top 75 all time. And he's like, well, I watch him every single day and I understand what he can bring, It's
yeah.
Like, when you don't listen to somebody like us that watches that watches the team every single day and knows the ins and outs of it, you don't understand that stuff. And I get that. Coming up, let's get into what these guys can actually bring. Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. And then, you mentioned it, the Dorian Finney-Smith update. Tim McMahon has already reported that Dorian Finney-Smith is signing a contract extension. We got to get into that as well. We'll continue with that on today's Locked On Mavs. But before we do, let me tell you about RockAuto.com. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models of cars, it's impossible for your chains and local auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. They got to be multiple too, just like the Mavericks, trying to have multiple different contracts that they can send out. Locked On has, Rock Auto has multiple different types of pieces and parts for your car that you can add. Go ahead and check out their family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. We encourage you to check out anything that's available for your car. Just go check it out. See what they have for your car. You may be surprised at some of the things that you find. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Isaac Harris. Whew, we are flying through this emergency pod. Thanks for everybody sticking with us. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe on the podcast if you have not. Rate us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify as well. All of a sudden, Spotify has 5-star reviews. So we appreciate you guys. We are here for you 5 days a week, hanging out with you guys, trying to make sense of this Kristaps Porzingis deal. Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans bring value to the Mavericks. They can actually play, right? These two guys can probably be part of a rotation. Davis Bertans maybe is on the fringes, but it depends on the Mavs' big man rotation. Both of these guys can bring something to the Mavs.
Oh, 100%. I mean, let's do this. Let's look at Sunday. They played the Hawks a few days ago. This was their starting unit: Luka, JB, Dwight Powell, Dorian, and Reggie Bullock. These guys played against Philly. They beat a really good Philly team. These guys played against the Hawks. They beat the Hawks. Now, you take that. We had a lot of fun with those 2 games. I mean, a lot of Mavs fans had a lot of fun with those 2 games. Now, you look at the bench for that 5. Marquise Chris, Josh Green, Trey Burke, Frank Ntilikina. Now, let's add Spencer Dinwiddie to that and Davis Bertans to that. Like, that's my thing. It's like, now they have a legit guy who could come off the bench and get buckets. I don't think Dinwiddie steps in and starts over Jalen Brunson. I don't think that. But you're telling me that now we can add Spencer Dinwiddie to come off the bench with, Maxey didn't play in that game, but now you have Maxey, Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, what is Bertans? If Maxey's out for, if you want to manage some of his minutes, like the whole Bertans thing with the shooting thing. We talked about Reggie Bullock for how long at the beginning of the season? Oh my gosh, 40% 3-point shooter. Can he just not shoot anymore? Like, you can't. Are you going to be shocked if Davis Bertans ends the season shooting like 35, 36% from 3, and he shoots from this point, he shoots like 40% from 3 the rest of the season? I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. I'm not saying it will, but I wouldn't be shocked.
No, absolutely not. Even just a change of scenery can change it for these guys. Remember some of the guys the Mavs have brought in over the last couple of years. Doug McDermott, remember, he shot like 50% from 3 to end the season after he got traded. So, I mean, that's what the Mavericks are looking at. And they upgrade in 2 areas we've been desperately pleading for them to upgrade in. 3-point shooting with Davis Bertans. You bring in a guy that can space the floor out deep, like real deep. He can hit the threes that Porzingis tries a lot. He can hit those threes, and he has the last couple of years. And playmaking, another ball handler, another playmaker. They needed a guy like that for games when Luka and Jalen Brunson are both in foul trouble, or one of them has to miss the game, right? All of a sudden now they have another option. It's not the greatest option, right? It's not the Zach LaVine perfect option next to Luka, but it is Spencer Dinwiddie as a guy that was, a fringe all-star 2 years ago that, has shown a lot of potential in this league. And maybe Jason Kidd as the point guard whisperer can do a better job than what, Wes Unseld Jr. could have done in Washington.
And it gives you just a tiny glimpse of, I was with a group of people, and after the trade went down, we were walking, and the guy I was talking to said, "Is this Jalen Brunson insurance?" And it gives you a tiny glimpse of tiny bit of insurance of, let's say Spencer Dinwiddie finishes the season really strong, and it's like, oh, awesome. Like, he's back to looking like, Dinwiddie that Washington thought they were getting. And then you go in the offseason and let's just say, the Knicks or whoever it is just blow Brunson's brains out with a contract offer. And for some reason he left. We don't want him to leave, but if for some reason he left, then you at least still have somebody on the roster that could get buckets from the guard position alongside Luka. So I think this is, I'm smiling. That's my whole thing. I'm walking out of this day. I'm smiling. I'm like, they did it. Like, I was afraid that the Porzingis, especially after another injury, he's still not playing right now. Okay. So because of injury, and it's like, especially after another thing, it's like, you're almost fatigued. I think a lot of fans, I'd reached a point to where I was just fatigued by it. It's like, how long do we have to do this of the in and out and all of that? And now that's over and we can see how it works out with Dinwiddie and Bertans.
Now, Dinwiddie and Bertans have had their own injury concerns. I'm not trying to say that these guys are the perfect role players to come in and just solve all the problems, right? But they do solve a little bit, right? And then there's all the contract stuff we said in the second segment. So these guys do bring something to the Dallas Mavericks, and I think that it's going to be better to have multiple players and multiple options instead of, all right, we're just waiting on Porzingis to come back. Okay, let's just hold on for Porzingis to come back. And then hopefully this offseason, the Mavs can take that huge step forward that they really want to when they have their picks available. They have multiples in these contracts. They have more guys they can trade out. And hopefully maybe they even revitalize some of the value in Dinwiddie and Bertans. They can trade them again in the offseason. But the move that just got reported by Tim McMahon is Dorian Finney-Smith getting an extension. Now he finally gets an extension, 4 years, $52 million, reported by multiple sources. Shams, Tim McMahon, Mark Stein. I mean, the Mavs just they sent out the bat signal for this deal. This is big for the Mavericks, right? They needed to do this. They needed to get this done. And he's not completely insanely overpaid either. No. This is a pretty good deal for the Mavericks, and I hope that Dorian Finney-Smith hopes it's a good deal for himself because he is so vital to the Mavericks. Like, if he's out, especially now with Porzingis out, the Mavericks big man and fours and fives is pretty shallow of high-end talent, and Dorian Finney-Smith answers that question at the 4, and the Mavericks have been really good when he plays this year.
Yeah, I'm super happy for him. I'm happy for the Mavs because it's a good deal. I'm happy for him personally because, I mean, remember, this guy went undrafted, right? I mean, now he gets a 4-year deal, $52 million, like from undrafted.
That's pretty amazing.
Undrafted guys get
from some of the stories you and I have heard about him and growing up and the things he saw, and it was tough for him. Yeah. It was tough for him to get to the NBA and to get to the spot that he was, to be undrafted, like he said, to be fighting for time for Justin Anderson. Like, let's just take a second and appreciate that this guy is making $50 million, and that's life-changing money for his family.
Yeah. So another part of the deal is, they're going to release Moses Brown, and that they just recalled him back up. So I'm sorry for the Moses Hive out there.
We have to RIP this sound.
This is a positive world. We'll take the positive. He was +2.
He was +2 was about Moses Brown.
Shout out to his media day interview where he said he would take a first date to Papados.
And also in his introductory press conference when he said that the film that he watches was of Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And Dirk.
No, he's a lot of fun. I hope he latches on somewhere, but I don't think the roster's, done either. I think you're looking at a prime buyout team. I think they are in need of a big now, a big body.
Huge need.
However, whoever gets bought out, Robin Lopez, Tristan Thompson, who are some of these bigs out there that I'm just saying, some big body guys that you could add for free, basically. I am really curious on what happens with Dragic at this point. Because now you obviously have Dinwiddie coming off the bench. What happens with that? I was really confident with that.
Do they still need a point guard like that, though? They could still use him, obviously. I think they can still. I mean, you could play Dinwiddie and Dragic together off the bench, but they still need a guy like that. Because Trey Burke's been okay in stepping in here recently.
Yeah, if he's willing to come here for free, take it. I mean, I would take him just for the leadership, friendship to Luka, all of that. And you can always use a guy like that coming off the bench. So, I mean, he's another scorer. I mean, we wanted the Mavs to go out and get scoring. And I feel like they did that today because at least we know. I mean, Bertans has missed games this season. Obviously, Dinwiddie's missed, I think, around 10 games this season. But let's do this, man. I'm excited. I'm obviously an optimistic person. I lean that way most of the time. But I'm not gonna lie, I would be on here too if they just straight up dumped KP to OKC for a couple seconds and whoever else. I wouldn't be as excited on the spot. I'm like, all right. However you feel about KP, you legit got worse in that case. You legit got worse this season. I'm not comfortable. I don't believe the statement of the Mavs got worse by trading Porzingis for Dinwiddie and Bertans. In the present. I don't believe that. And I do think there's a world that their ceiling is higher because they have another perimeter scorer in Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, there was more times when the Mavs needed another guy to get a bucket than a guy, to do what Kristaps Porzingis was doing on offense. And they are going to miss him on defense, though. Not going to lie about that, right? That is to me where I think the Mavs did get worse is they don't have that rim protector to turn to. The Mavs desperately need somebody, and it looks like they didn't use their traded player exception we thought that they might use. That was a long shot for them to get a big in that scenario, but we'll see what happens to get somebody else. But this offseason, that's going to be a huge thing for the Mavs to try and get. And now they'll just cobble together this lineup of, Dwight Powell and Maxey and Marquise Chris. Marquise Chris is getting a huge step up in minutes probably right now.
Winner of the day.
Kind of, because Moses Brown is gone too. He outlasted Moses Brown, and he now gets some of the Kristaps Porzingis minutes too. So this is also huge for the Mavs. The Mavs are also going to play small a lot now. They're going to play way more small now. Way more small? They're going to play way more small ball now.
Smaller. Reliably is probably shaking his head saying, solid move. Right. I mean, because their whole thing, was they had to try to force the Porzingis thing to happen because they wanted to spread the lineups out, get Luka the ball and say, shoot a ton of threes, Luka, do your thing. And with this, now you're not trying to force it, right? Like if you want to go out and get a Miles Turner this offseason, go out and get him. You're not worried about fitting 2 7-footers together. It's much easier to find fits with guards and wings than it is having $30 million tied up to a 7-footer who's not a Jokic and Embiid or something like that. So that's just where they're at. They have more flexibility moving forward. The contracts are split up, like you said. Sign me up for this deal. I'm not saying it, hey, take them to the Western Conference Finals type of deal, but I'm walking away smiling, and I didn't think I would walk away from a Porzingis trade smiling.
Speaking of smiling, somebody tweeted out that Porzingis learned about this deal while ordering a sandwich in downtown Dallas. And I tweeted it. It's pretty funny if you go see his facial expression. But yeah, shout out to the guy that tweeted that. I kind of hope it's true. It's really funny if you see his facial expression in the picture. But yeah, that's what we got. Hey, guess what? The Mavs play a game tonight. The Mavericks actually have a game against the Clippers. We'll have another show for you tonight after the game. We'll break that down, talk more about this trade, I'm sure, and talk about, if the Mavs miss 1,000,000 threes, like, oh, dang, they're going to miss Porzingis. Or if
we get to see everybody's quotes too, right? Like, Kid's going to talk about Luka. Everybody will answer post game about it. At some point, we didn't get an immediate presser from Nico. Donnie had originally done that in the past. At some point, I would expect Nico to talk to the media about it. And I'll just be really curious on that. Is this, there's some
how do they position it, right? How do they pitch it to the masses?
How do they position it? But also to bring it full circle here, outside the money, outside the on-court fit, the roster and all of that. I think we also have to keep an open mind of what was the relationship like with Porzingis and the front office going from last playoffs until now? What was the talk behind the scenes? Was there talk about finding him a new home? Did he truly love being here with Luka and all of that stuff? Like, there's a lot of stuff like that. How do the Mavericks feel about him long-term and his knees and injuries? Like, are you looking at this saying, ooh, they really think he's jacked up? They
know him better than anybody now. Casey Smith and company know him and his body better than maybe he does.
Like, what if the Mavs have been looking at it saying, man, the first chance we have to trade him for one or two guys that can be in a rotation and that have an upside that could be really good. Like, Dinwiddie has an upside that could be good for the Mavs. If they were waiting for that chance and because of how worried they were about his knees and injury and all that, and then they got this in, like, we got to jump on this before he's hurt again. Right. Like, we don't know, but that's stuff behind the scenes that we might not ever know.
We might never know, but we're going to try to find out for you guys. So we'll come back with the show tonight. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.